Hey there, friends. I have a really interesting video that I want to run by you guys. It's to show the inaccuracies of the FBI's reporting of how good guys with guns are actually preventing mass casualty events out there. In many cases, the FBI is either miscalculating or completely just leaving out various instances where guys with firearms are ending mass casualty events before they actually have the opportunity to take many more lives. In some cases, no lives are even taken when a person starts to indiscriminately shoot at innocent people. Now, I'm using two sources here. I have usacarry.com, and of course, John Lott is a really renowned artist in many cases. This is a rearclearinvestigations.com article that I'm also using. I'll post those links down below. Now, why is it important that the FBI captures these events accurately whenever a good guy stops bad guys with guns? It's mainly because there's a narrative that is constantly being driven that somehow this is not a thing, that somehow it doesn't happen. And that's not true. So whether or not the FBI is doing this on purpose or it's just inaccuracies based on inadequacies within the FBI, which is certainly a possibility based on what we've been seeing lately, who knows? But it does have an effect because a lot of people look to the FBI as being their, well, that's my source. You know what I mean? That's where I'm getting my information from. I mean, who's going to distrust the FBI, right? That's always been the case. Everybody kind of stopped their research at the FBI being, all right, well, that's going to be my measuring stick. That's where the bar is set at the FBI. So if they say X, then X must be a fact. That's actually not true. To better understand this, we must first define what the FBI defines as an active shooter. The FBI defines active shooter incidents as those in which an individual actively engages in killing or attempting to kill people in a populated public area. Now, using this definition, the FBI reported that only 11 out of 252 active shooter incidents it identified for the period between 2014 and 2021 were stopped by an armed citizen. However, this article shows that there were actually 281 active shooter incidents, with 41 of them actually having an armed citizen stopping any further casualties in the event. Now, this is no small thing. With the FBI's numbers, that's only 4.4% of active shooter incidents that were ended by armed citizens, where the CPRC number actually was 14.6%, more than 10% over. So it certainly paints a totally different picture than what the FBI's actual numbers were. In two of the incidents, the FBI noted in detailed write-up that citizens possessing valid firearms permits confronted the shooters and caused them to flee the scene. And these were not counted because the law enforcement officers later on went on to catch these criminals. So in other words, they were saying that they weren't counted because we ended up, meaning law enforcement, ended up catching them eventually. Well, that's just stupid, because if they were stopped at the scene of the crime from shooting more people by good guys with guns, just because the police were able to capture them later does not change the fact that the good guys thwarted these shootings. In some incidents, the actual good guys with guns were listed as security guards when they were not in fact security guards. A perfect example, and you guys will all remember this particular case, was the West Freeway Church of Christ in White Settlement, Texas. Two men were actually shot dead, but if you'll remember, Jack Wilson quickly jumped into action and he ended up shooting the killer in the church house. The reason why the FBI felt like this was not a recordable incident with a good guy stopping a bad guy with a gun is because they looked at Mr. Wilson as being a security guard, only because he was named in name only as a security approved person within the church. Actually, Mr. Wilson goes on to claim that there were probably upwards of 20 people who had the same christening as being security. They weren't any other type of formal security. They were just guys who the church recognized as people who they knew were going to be carrying within the church, and they were okay with that. The FBI miscalculated that again, but simply by saying that, oh, we thought Mr. Wilson was actually a security guard when he was not. Now, there were another 25 additional incidents that the FBI accidentally left off their list for whatever reason. The oddity in all of this, and the reason why I bring this up and push this so hard, is because you ever notice how when there are errors made, they're never made in our favor? You notice how they didn't accidentally omit a bunch of mass shootings? You notice how they didn't accidentally add more of these good guys with guns erroneously that ended mass shootings? You notice that? They never err in our favor. It's always an error that goes against the Second Amendment or the gun rights community. Now, part of the problem is also that the FBI has become very biased, very political, and they kind of have an agenda. The agenda is to make it look like, of course, the same thing that the anti-gun groups and most of the media say, is that good guys should not have guns, because they make this wild, stupid, inaccurate claim that if good guys have guns, that all kinds of people are going to be shot when the bad guys start shooting. Now, an AP reporter, Ed White, was actually asked about this and trying to control this narrative. And his response was that our reporting, citing the specific research by Texas State University over a 20-year period, was accurate. No correction was necessary. So he's basically saying that even though we are providing you with all of this proof that your numbers are in fact wrong, because I'm supplying you with the data that debunks your incorrect numbers, he's saying our numbers are still right. So that's part of the problem. We don't have real journalism that happens anymore. It's the media sticking to a narrative, and when you prove them wrong, they prove that they aren't journalists because they aren't willing to retract their inadequacies. They stick to their story and say, I'm not changing anything. My stuff is staying the way it is. Because they aren't true journalists. They are simply op-ed writers that are carrying cards of journalism incorrectly. Now, we keep hearing this stupid narrative that if more people are carrying guns, that whenever there's some kind of a mass casualty shooting or something, some kind of event like that where a bad guy has a gun, that suddenly all kinds of innocent people will be shot. You know how many cases there are of that happening? Just take a wild guess. Give me a number, any number. Take a wild guess. 0. There are literally 0 recorded cases, even though we have a media that wants there to be cases, and we have an FBI who is weaponizing all of this politically. No one can come up with a case as bad as they want to. They still can't come up with one single case. It's all hypothetical. As many people as we have carrying firearms out there right now, and no one is being accidentally shot when good guys are stopping bad guys, you would think that they would get off of this narrative. But it's because there are so many stupid people out there watching and reading what these people put out that they're willing to stick to their story because, hey, nobody's debunking them. It also makes me think that whenever they are looking at the gun culture, those of us who do carry in public, they simply don't understand it. They can't wrap their head around the fact that there are good people out there who are willing to intervene in a bad situation, in a deadly situation, no doubt, and willing to stop it and potentially risk their own lives in doing that because these people are mostly cowards. I'm serious. I'm not making jokes here. So because they have more of a cowardice approach, a flee rather than a fight approach like many of us would, they envision us having that same cowardice that they have. So they see themselves, if they put themselves in that situation with a gun, like hunkering down behind a bench and shooting over the top of their head like you see on TV, some of these stupid shows that you see. That's how they envision that. Well, of course, there could be people likely getting accidentally shot, but they don't understand that gun culture. They don't understand the responsibility that those of us behind the trigger actually have when we are behind that trigger. We're not going to randomly, indiscriminately shoot over a park bench or behind some kind of a cabinet when we're out in public thinking that we're in some kind of a crazy firefight like on TV. No, we take our time, just like you've been seeing in Indiana here recently and some other cases. We are taking our time and we're taking out the bad guys, what it is. They can't wrap their minds around that because, again, their first instinct is simply to flee.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America.